What's your experience been on the ground, meeting people and seeing their homes? What's your sense of how the Northern Rivers is doing right now? We're mid-December, almost sort of 10 months out from the floods.
Yeah, we'll be sort of 10 months out in late December. So look, I was up here on ground in early March. The enormity of what happened is just incredible. We were over in South Lismore before any of the cleanup had happened. Really confronting. I was just sort of gobsmacked by it, and many members of my team would say, make sure you get heaps of photos while you're up there, and I found it too confronting to take photos, particularly you just see the misery that people were going through, like that they were still in shock. So I found that really confronting. To see where we are now, in many ways, it's quite amazing that out of that devastation, there's sort of all these green shoots, and at times, if you sort of you come into some of the areas, if you hadn't been here before, you might think, hey, everything's still standing, it's all right, but it's only if you go through there, some areas at night, where there's no lights on, where there would have been lights, whilst some of the outside of the houses looks fine, when you go into, they're just empty shells. And I think, much like for many of the individuals, like that out of veneer may be fine, but it doesn't take much to sort of break through that, and you really see that and hear that trauma that people have gone through and continue to relive. It's a long road ahead of us, and what will be important is that we're able to get a few key wins along the way there, because I think rightly community, they'll still sit on the fence. I think when we get that individual engagement with them, they can see that the team really has their interests at heart. I think they can feel the passion we have for what we're doing, but credibility and trust is only something you build over time with action, and people really need to see those demonstrated outcomes. So I think, the way I feel, every member of this community, every day they're going to wait for a decision, for an outcome, for, some glimmer of hope on something is a really long time. So there's got to be that urgency about what we do as well. There's no playbook of how to solve this at scale, certainly in the Australian experience or even internationally. This is like a huge region, a magnificent region, thousands of people impacted by it. So there's, the immediacy of what we've got to do now, and then, we can see, our objective of, getting to safe and vibrant communities again, but sort of how to get there. There's so many different moving parts, so many interdependencies, and we know that we don't have all the answers now, but we know what the next few steps are. And for me, it's always about, what are the no regrets decisions we can get on with now? What are the low regrets decisions? And what are those things that require greater evidence? We really need to pull the science in to guide our decision making into the future, because we just can't be paralysed by indecision.
Is there going to be a protected pathway, though, for people that have been flood impacted to get this land at a cost that is, affordable to them? Is there going to be something that a bridge? Because people are concerned that if it just goes to the free market, it's going to be a free-for-all.
Yeah, and look, that's absolutely front of mind to us, is the affordability question, and also giving people that who have sort of opted into a voluntary purchase the first option on these lots. We're relatively optimistic that there are certain interventions that we can have that'll deliver the sort of outcomes we need there. And it's about NRRC working both with government, working with the community housing sector on that. We've got to be live to a whole range of different opportunities there as well. So all things are on the table at this point, and pretty optimistic we'll get there. And I think certainly when we're looking at private development land and giving that sort of an expedient pathway through, part of the quid pro quo of that is ensuring the appropriate outcomes for the most affected people in the community as well. So this isn't about a free-for-all. It's not about sort of opening things up, creating McMansion style development. It's about getting the best outcomes for the people in most need, and that's like right at the front of our minds in terms of all the work we do.
And you said all options are on the table.
Yep.
Are land swaps on the table?
Yeah, look, I think there's been a lot of discussion around land swaps, right from the get-go, and many people will point to Grantham as an example of that, and I think it is a really relevant example. There are many learnings we can take from it. It's just the scale of what we're dealing with here. Grantham was sort of 120 homes in a discrete location where there was a clearly identified development site up the hill that was flood free. What we're dealing with here is in the order of about 2,000 homes over 7 local government areas, an enormous geographic area. I think what it does, if we're to try and play that matchmaker in lining up a land swap for each and every one of those, it just brings in so much complexity into the work we're doing at the moment that there's a high potential it really slows things down. So I guess what the focus is there at the moment in really ensuring that we unlock supply. We sort of know what our there was a strong demand pre-flood. There's the sort of post-flood demand that's come over the top of that. We've got to unlock supply of a similar amount over a period of time. Importantly, for people who opt in for a voluntary purchase, they can have a very extended settlement. Okay, so they can get the certainty of knowing, you're eligible for a voluntary purchase. Here's your amount. They can be signed up to that, and then if the house is habitable and they're living there now, they could stay there another year, another 2 years until sort of supplies are unlocked. To try and take some of that pressure away. But in terms of land swaps, I won't rule it out at all, because we've certainly looked at a number of locations where, if we can make it work, we'll absolutely do all we can to make it work. So I think, look, in terms of everything that we're doing, we don't want to rule things out. We want to work with community to get the outcomes that they want. It is it's their community. So we've got to understand that we don't have all of the best ideas. What we do have is a significant amount of funding there in terms of both resilient homes and resilient lands. There's sort of $800 million there at this point. We've got guidelines that support that. So we've certainly, in any of the decisions we make, they've got to be consistent with that. But we ought to be looking for challenges. I want to invite the community to challenge us to come forward with ideas, and we'll always consider those. So
there's a sense of, on the one hand, it's being you're articulating that you want feedback from the community and you want to be working with community, but there isn't actually any system or structure to facilitate that, and it hasn't really happened as well. And so the at least on the, from the outside, maybe there are internal community members, I'm not sure, but the public are crying out for a voice, and they I feel fairly confident in saying they do not feel heard.
Yeah, okay. And look, I'll take that, but I guess my response would be we weren't able to sort of get out on the front foot with this until governments have made a decision around the program. I certainly wasn't in a position to get out and be consulting on something that government may not choose to fund. So, and it was around the Resilient Homes program that's co-funded by state and Commonwealth government. So, it wasn't then until, we had that final decision from the Commonwealth and then, the announcement, until we actually had something to talk about. In terms of the design of that program, it's, quite consistent with that was rolled out by the Queensland Reconstruction Authority. They certainly rolled it out some months prior to us, but that's the benefit of having an organisation that's been in play for 11 years, that's sort of positioned for disaster recovery. But since we've had the announcement of that, I think as of today, we've now had 24 community sessions. We've had more than 1,080 people attend those, and that really provides the platform for that. What I'd say to people is, look, we can't change what's happened. We've got to accept that. But what we've got here on the table is some real opportunity in terms of funding. Look, for the first time, we've got some really significant funding here on the table. We've got a team here that wants to work with the community to really make a difference. So we can sit and spend all our time sort of looking in the rearview mirror at what's happened and what should have happened, but it's really not going to change anything. What we're going to do is look forward, or get aiming at the one spot. We sort of got to have a shared vision of where we can get to, and we've got to work together on that.
So is there more of a consultation plan coming together now, moving forward? I mean, the town halls are a good start. A really good start.
They're just the starting point. Okay, and we're here for the long haul. Like our program of work will take at least 5 years to roll out. So these are just the first early steps. So there'll be a whole number of different ways we can engage. I think the Living Lab is a great example of that. So the collaboration we've set up with Southern Cross Uni. So that can be a place of engagement there. There's various engagement forums we've run with the like the trades and contracting community, but there will be plenty of opportunities, and particularly as we get into some of really the economic recovery, what we're doing around revitalisation of town centres and so on. So as we really start to develop visions of what we can be in the future, that'll be the opportunity for the community to come in as part of that. We're like a startup, when we sort of kicked off, when in April when I got the call up to say I was leading this, it needed to be stood up by the 1st of July. It was just me. So, we sort of go, well, okay, what are the things we've got to do? What's the team we need? And then, ever since then, we've sort of been building the thing as we fly it. So I think we can always do better. We will do better.
No, I mean, I recognize that it's an enormous undertaking, and you were just brought into this position and thrown into the mix. I think it's I think even acknowledging that publicly, like we are co-developing this plan now, because there's this sense people feel that information is being withheld from them. And that is a really horrible feeling, because if you're living in a no power, no water, just waiting, bated breath for some
look, but people need that agency. I get that. When you don't have control over much that's happening in your life, I think it's ever more important. But look, we've got no interest in holding back on anything. You know, it's transparency in what we do. You know, the purpose in what we're doing. You know, where there might be whole points. You know, I owe that to the community to share around that. You know, we want to move as quickly as we can on this. Equally, we want to make the right decisions as well. So it's always around trying to get that balance of sort of not letting perfect be the enemy of good. But I think, you know, the interests we've got are the community's interests, you know, where we all need to be aiming at the same place. Many of our staff are, you know, people that live here in the Northern Rivers. They're people that were impacted by the floods. They're family members, friends impacted by the floods as well. So they're as vested in it as anybody else. For me, you know, it's about sort of fronting up to community and about being upfront with them when you do. And you know, that's what, you know, that's how you expect the whole team to work, and they do.
I like you so much more than I'm going to cut this out like you, than I thought I would, you know, and so I'm not trying to, like the last thing I'm trying to do is put you in the corner.
No, it's fine.
It's that like there's all these voices, you know, and I've just been on the ground listening to people, and you know, everything you say is so eloquent. It makes sense. It sounds good. But then when I speak to people, the level of confusion around this program, what's happening and when, is profound. You know, there seems to be a lack of transparency. Or maybe it's not transparency, but the communication link is not happening. Like town halls, in my humble opinion, are not enough. You know, it's the 30 people in Korakai. It's so many people couldn't get into that meeting. It's during work hours, and that's just like a small microcosm. Like where is, and I recognize you guys, you fully are a startup, and hopefully the start of something, you know, that takes the New South Wales disaster response in a completely new direction, you know, but where is the robust website with all the information, all your answers? It's every time you do an interview, the internet goes wild because you've said something that people haven't heard before, and there's nowhere to go to get all of the information. And there's a sense of shifting around timelines. You know, you talk about the orange and the red zones, but the map is not available to people, and so what happens is, in a vacuum, you know, they get 10 minutes at the end of a session to ask you questions, and then there's thousands of people that aren't even in those sessions. So it's you know, I guess I have a series of questions, and then I also have some suggestions of things that I've put together from people that I've spoken to, and one of them is, you know, a really clear communication strategy. You know, there needs to be a central place where people can come and get their information about what's happening.
Look, and you know, accept the criticism around the website. You know, the team shares the same view. You know, we're really not happy with it either. And you'd be pleased to know we've got a new one in development that's not far off rolling out. So that's really pleasing. And you know, that's sort of going to be the central hub of, you know, we're updating frequently asked questions. You know, we've got sort of videos of town halls and, you know, the various things we're doing, guides and so on. So yeah, it's been a personal frustration of mine. You know, I dive in and sort of test it myself, and think it's pretty.
It's a sad place, that website. You go and you feel sadder after.
And look, the whole team shares that reflection, and you know, it's not been you know, something, you know, we sort of had full control over at this point, but yeah, we're not far away from getting that in a much better place as well. And I guess, you know, the community sessions aren't for everybody. You know, many people will just choose to sort of, you know, deal on their own. They'll want to work direct with a case manager and so on, and that's fine. So we've sort of got to be, you know, all things to all people in terms of that. Really discourage people from sort of trying to fill in the gaps on things. They sort of get a snippet of information, and then social media can be a wonderful thing, but it can things can run like wildfire through there and be incorrect at times, and can do a real sort of, or just cause people a whole lot of unnecessary anxiety. What I would always encourage people, if you've got a question, you've got a concern, come to us directly, and we'll do our best to sort of answer that in a timely way. In terms of maps around the zones, and look, I think a really valid concern, really understand why people would, they want to see that, and I think for people that come along to the community sessions, people want to know, am I in or am I out? In terms of putting that up there, it could create, because the information's not granular enough in terms of a map. It's one important layer of information, but in terms of the assessment, it's a much richer assessment than that. And I guess an example I would give of that is, you may have somebody who is, on the surface, they're eligible for a house raising, but they're in a wheelchair, and the house has got to be raised 3 metres. Clearly, house raising is not an option that is going to work for them. In that sort of circumstances, it may well be that a voluntary purchase, because of those individual circumstances, is the most appropriate outcome from a risk management point of view. So the downside of putting maps up there is that people come along in a community forum and either look at that and go, I'm eligible, and then it relies on that detailed assessment, and they find out that they're actually not eligible, and sort of vice versa around that. And I was really concerned with the reaction people may have to sort of come out in a public forum and find out for the first time that, hey, I'm in the middle of a red zone kind of. We've only just at the start of sort of contact and those early conversations, but that initial conversation with people is taking on average about 35 minutes. Just that first conversation before we've even got into detailed case management. But I think progressively we'll be in a position to sort of share more and more, and particularly as we get out and we're able to process those initial sort of voluntary purchase agreements and so on, then we'll be able to demonstrate what we're doing there. We've got dashboards in development there, so community will be able to see how we're tracking in terms of our outreach and so on.
I think that would be so good to show
what's
in progress, and how many houses, and and a timeline and a calendar, and I know it's a huge ask, but I think because of the extremity of the situation, and you guys have just come in, but these people have been living in these homes for the last 10 months, with a third season of La Nina on the horizon, and so there is very much a sense of urgency, and I think the mental health piece of just, if people, even if they weren't happy with the answer, if they knew when they were going to get a call from a case manager. And I recognize it's hard because some of this is unfolding as we speak, but is that transparency around the timeline also a part of the picture?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So, we've certainly got some initial targets we're working to, but what we're trying to do is just calibrate those at the moment. So looking at how long the calls are taking, looking at how long the assessments are taking, and then what it will take to do the independent evaluations and so on. So really working through with these sort of early assessments almost as sort of individual case studies, so we can then sort of build up the metrics then that sort of underpin the whole program. So I think, early in the new year, we'll have a pretty good feel for how long things are going to take, and it'll be, a little bit of a slower ramp up than I think than anybody would like. And, I personally sort of get frustrated by it at times, but I think you're right in that, people want to know, what their eligibility is, and need to do that pretty quickly. The challenge is, we're dealing with more than 6,000 homeowners, and for each of them, it's urgent, and I get that, but we're prioritising it from a risk point of view in terms of who are those people at sort of greatest risk to life, who sort of suffered the most damage through this event, and sort of working out from there. And
it makes sense. I guess it's just concerning given these people are still living on the floodplain. Like, there could very well be another flood in the next year. We don't know when, we don't know how big. And obviously this is a massive undertaking that requires time and research and funding and all of that. But people are still in a state of emergency. They are, going to bed on a floodplain that we know is life-threatening. So, while on the one hand 5 years sounds really reasonable given the scope of what needs to happen, my heart, having looked in the eyes of these people, is like, well, a lot of people just can't wait that long. And given where we know they are and what we know can happen there, that's a really precarious timeline.
Yeah, but it's not, ours is just part of the work there. There's improvements that need to be made in terms of, that initial response as well. And, the independent flood inquiry made a broad spectrum of recommendations, for 28 in total there, and, about things such as early warning systems, about sort of having more people trained, for flood rescue, a whole range of things which is sort of being implemented in parallel as well. So, certainly what we're doing is, it's critically important, but it's not the only thing. There's a whole system of improvements that have got to come together. We're an important part of that, because what we're doing here is really implementation of adaptation, in what's a really changing. Even if we could give people all these decisions now, it's not going to get them out of harm's way, or it may before the next event, but we don't know what that is, when that'll happen. That's an ever-present risk. But I think also important to understand, like, the magnitude of the event or the two events that happened here, and certainly the February 28, an enormous event, in parts of the catchment, it sort of ranged up to, what you consider maybe a 1 in 2,000 year event, and probably at the lower spectrum, maybe a 1 in 200 year event. So really enormous events by any scale. But what we need more of an understanding is, with the impacts of climate change or heat environment, how that will shift over time, and what the impacts of that will be. Yeah, there's enormous challenges ahead of us, but with that comes a whole heap of opportunity as well.
Do you have a sense of a big vision for the Northern Rivers recovery beyond, the House scheme being a part of that, but adaptation, mitigation, community, rivers, hills? Do you have a sense of what that could look like, or what you want it to look like?
Yeah. Look, we I think, within the team, we all share different views of that. Importantly, we need to work with each of the communities here to really understand
what their view is, and I think arrive at a bit of a shared vision of what the future can look like. But in terms of my own views, it's really about bringing the vibrancy back into the communities here. But key to doing that is ensuring people are living safely. So you take that anxiety away, so you don't go to sleep at night thinking that, hey, it's raining, we're going to wake up submerged in the house. So it's about absolutely de-risking the communities around here. So I think we've got to have a really thorough understanding of what's happened, why it's happened, what could happen into the future. And I think people, it's just human nature. People look at history as an indicator of the future. So people who lived through the 2017 flood thought, hey, got through that, I'll be fine. Some even going back to earlier floods, 74, and got through that. That's the benchmark. But we know the probable maximum flood, for example, in Lismore, was about 2 metres above the flood we experienced this year. And that's, I think, in a preparedness sense, we need to understand what is the worst that can happen. Yeah, really unlikely to happen, but it could happen. And we need to be prepared for that. Once we sort of understand what mitigations are possible, then we need to do the analysis to understand, well, does it stack up in an investment sense? Does it make sense to sort of spend this money? Because with any investment, say if it's a flood mitigation dam, for example, there are a whole lot of impacts of that in environmental senses as well. So there's all the trade-offs. If you look at constructing levees, we'll protect one area, but it'll have adverse impacts for another area. So there's interdependencies with every single thing we do. But I think we've got to understand, well, what are all the available options? How do they all stack up? And what's the pathway forward from that? So I think, look, I'm really optimistic around where we can get to, and what the future is for the northern rivers. It's an area of spectacular natural beauty. There's sort of no secret about that. Everybody would love to live here. But I think we've got to understand as its inhabitants, how we sort of interplay with it to do that safely, and understanding that even though these events may have sort of been somewhat driven by climate change to a degree, like massive floods, even probable maximum floods, are natural events, and the only problem is where we choose to live. So big floods, big fires, earthquakes, all those sort of things are natural events. Yeah, they may be catastrophic, but we will work out how we can sort of live with nature to do that safely. So.
It seems like it would make sense to just get people off the floodplain, rather than create all of these barriers to the rivers, to try to mitigate an area that is known to flood catastrophically and will likely flood again. I mean, what do you think about that?
Oh, look, I think you look at human civilization, the world around, people live in floodplains. Because fertile soils, availability of water, spectacular views, and they're often settled because of transportation, through shipping and so on.
But this is a very different area.
So
we're in.
Yeah. So look, they are great places to live, and you look at here, sort of, the Richmond Valley, a really fertile area because of the fact it floods, that's where you got such good soil. So I think, we can't, people are always going to live on floodplains. They're just not going to live in the riskiest part of those floodplains. So, we just sort of got to look at it, well, what's an acceptable level of risk to life? what's an acceptable level of economic risk in terms of, you know, how many times can you bounce back from things, and then, you know, in terms of how much emotional trauma can people suffer as well. So if you've got an opportunity to remove yourself from that, I think, you know, that's a good opportunity as well. So there's no, I think, you know, there's no black and white around any of this, but you certainly, you know, you can look at really high risk parts of catchments in the floodplain, and, you know, they're areas where houses are washed away. I'd be very reluctant for, you know, for anybody to go back into those sort of places. But there are certainly areas here that, you know, copped inundation in an event that, you know, may only happen, you know, in any 1 year.
Yeah.
You know, there might be a 99.8% chance that that's not going to happen. So, you know, you could flood harden that sort of place so that in a future event you can recover much more quickly as well. And I think, you know, something outsiders to the Northern Rivers don't appreciate is just the scale of the impacts. And, you know, whilst Lismore was the epicentre of it, it's only probably in terms of damage, maybe only about 25% of what's happened. But people who haven't been to Lismore don't understand. It's a city, you know, it's a regional city. It's not just as simple as, oh, yeah, we'll just pick it up and sort of move it here or there. So.
Yeah. And in terms of the numbers, 2,000 for each of those categories, it feels like some people might fall through the cracks there. Given how many homes were inundated with water, is this, I mean, $800 million it's a big chunk of money, but it feels like, given the scope of the damage, it's probably not going to get everyone to safety.
Yeah, and the 800, so there's 700 for resilient homes, 100 for lands, and, you know, that 700's the first tranche of funding, so that takes us through till the end of 23-24, that financial year. So we'll do a program evaluation before we get to the end of that, look at what the uptake has been around the program, what the costs are associated with it. We'll recalibrate it then for the second tranche. So yeah, definitely be more money required to do what needs to be done here. But in terms of the people that will benefit from the program, it won't be, you know, everybody who's impacted by the flood will be a beneficiary of the Resilient Homes program, because, you know, the underlying driver for the program, why we're doing the program, is all about risk reduction. So, you know, at the top of that is mitigating that risk to life, and that's what the voluntary purchase is about. And then everything thereafter is about really mitigating that risk to future economic loss, and that's the house raising and the resilient refitting. So there are certainly places that got damaged that won't be eligible under our program, but you know, it would certainly be our understanding that those places that won't be eligible would most likely have been eligible for flood insurance and sort of affordable. With all these things, there's got to be a cut-off at some point. So, yeah. But, you know, the focus of this program is around, you know, putting most of the funding, you know, where there's the greatest risk, and, you know, and that often correlates with those at greatest need as well, who've sort of suffered the most catastrophic loss through this. And, you know, certainly in terms of the voluntary purchase program for those who are eligible, you know, it's a strong program in that it's an independent pre-flood market valuation of your home. It does, you know, provide, you know, a significant opportunity for people, but we realise that without sort of solving the supply side of the equation,
it's not always a solution as well. Whilst people get a solid amount of money for their home, if they can't get back into the market, well then we've lost them to the community here as well. So.
Yeah. So that's definitely something that's on your mind. And
Absolutely,
yeah. It's good to hear. How many people have registered so far?
Yeah, it's in the order of more than 5,500 so far. There's no cut-off to that at this point, so we'll keep monitoring that.
Is there anything else that you would like to communicate to people that is on your mind?
Just really want people to understand that there's no hidden agenda in terms of what we're doing. Like our work is absolutely about trying to get this community not just back on its feet, but in a better position and in a safer position. And the whole team we've got here is just so focused on what needs to be done. People are so energised, so passionate. Like we feel it's a privilege to be able to work with community here on the reconstruction effort. So just encourage people to be patient, work with us. Over time, we will build the trust, we'll build the credibility. People see the results of the work that we're doing, and be assured that we're here for the long haul as well. We're not just going to walk away. We're here to absolutely get the job done, and we're all really invested. For me, whilst it's probably been one of the most challenging 6 months of my professional life, it doesn't compare to what people are going through on the ground. It's so invigorating as well, knowing that we're in a position here where we can make a difference. We've got the community depend on us for making a difference, and people all around are sort of looking in at what we do. So there's absolutely the spotlight on our work, and we want to not just do the job here, but do it really well.
It's an amazing opportunity. Like the Northern Rivers could become a leader in adaptation, and an incredible comeback story.
Exactly. In terms of where homes vacate areas, we'll work with communities on strategies there. Whether it's riparian corridors, whether we develop biodiversity offsets. There's a whole range of opportunities there by really using floodplains and those high-risk floodplains, seeing them as natural assets. So I think a whole lot of opportunity there. We're looking at billions of dollars of expenditure coming in here in terms of rebuilding the housing stock, the infrastructure. This is a once-in-a-generation economic opportunity as well. And I think we've got to harness that. So we're really got to look for. There's a whole lot of positivity that can come out of this. So, but we'll only be successful if we work together on that. The last thing we need to do is sort of be, fighting with each other along the way, but. Right along the way, we want robust discussion around things. We want to be challenged. We want people to come forward with ideas. We're not going to have all the ideas. I'm a passionate believer in the best ideas are out there with community. So encourage people to bring those forward. And, we'll get there.